Let's take a look at what is happening internationally, where at least 45 people have been killed by cholera in Zimbabwe in the past 3 weeks, according to the World Health Organization, describing the strain as multi-drug resistant. It said that an oral vaccine campaign was due to begin shortly, with 450,000 people targeted in the worst affected suburbs of the country. we had from the leaders as well. And we want to interrogate this because that lengthy speech, if you had it, Trump spoke in triumphal terms, right? He poured scorn on the ideology of globalism. He went full steam ahead also to castigate the OPEC organization, of course, on the oil prices. But also there was a rejoinder from Macron who said America is to blame as far as the skyrocketing prices of oil is concerned with this reimposition of sanctions on Iran. And of course also some of them also will come into force in November as well. Let's just throw it to our panelist. Begin with you. Yes, Dr. Mustafa, looking at Trump, he's really struggling with the auto cue there, right? I think he's not really used to prepared speeches. He speaks off the bat, and right. So now really making him read off an auto cue is really a struggle for him. You can see him squinting. But if you listen to the speech, it was all about America first and America policy, right? And for the last 2 good years that he's done pretty well, which actually also stirred a lot of chuckles and a laughter from the delegates as well. Your reaction?
Yeah, clearly the auto cue was torturing Trump. He is used to speaking without the auto cue. First of all, his claim that, you know, he's been the best, among the best of the American president. We leave that to the a survey that is going to be done. It's normally done after a head of state has served. I think Obama is number 18, is ranked 18, all the way from the first president of the United States of America to today. Pretty good rank there. Trump's speech at the UN wasn't inspiring. At this time when, in the words of Antonio Guterres, the SG for the United Nations, yes, saying that the world is suffering a trust deficit at this point, and that each and every state seems to be edgy with, or most states seems to be edgy with the other, you would then expect that a powerful country, a head of state of the most powerful country on earth, to actually focus on how the world is going to restore that trust that clearly is lacking now. And I want to point out 4 countries, Debarl, here. Mm-hmm. First of all, the star of yesterday's United Nations General Assembly, I watched until very late at night, was King Hussein of Jordan. Mm-hmm. He was spot on what needs to be done, on what should be done in the Middle East and globally. Mm-hmm. And the 4 states I want to call out here, which are fairly influential, yes, very influential, some of them, but seems to not be doing what is expected of them: North Korea, Iran, Israel, and the United States of America. These are 4 countries that seems to, they can do a lot better than they are in trying to globally to resolve those conflicts. And if you are to go by some of the statements coming out of yesterday's from the President of the United States of America, mm-hmm, I think it's more about pouring more fuel, putting more fuel into that fire. Hardly inspiring, hardly, or rather pretty much unhelpful in the current situation. Mm-hmm.
So what would you say about him pouring scorn on the ideology of globalism? Because also earlier on, before also they began rolling off the tongue with their speeches, we had the Secretary General saying that, yes, the world is in dire need of, a hope, and the fact that multilateralism is under threat, that should be a big worry, because we should be merchants of hope right now. And so the issue of globalism, which is not really fronted by the Americans, and of course President Trump with his reconfigured foreign policy of America First, what does that really do to cooperation in the world as opposed to protectionism ideology?
Yeah, thanks, Debarl. Just to take it up from Dr. Mustafa, well, American exceptionalism is not new. They have also had such doctrines. There used to be the Monroe Doctrine and so on, where, the U.S. itself sort of, Monroe Doctrine was about Latin America, but there was a time the U.S. had a very powerful isolationist policy. Mm-hmm. until round about the Second World War and so on. But basically, there are a number of straightforward theoretical arguments that come to mind when you're thinking about this push and pull. We call it great power push and pull. The power that is number one, that is at the highest of the hierarchy in terms of power and hegemony, it tends to want to maintain that. And to maintain that, sometimes you have to keep the challengers below you at a certain level. And it can give the ones that are on the top a lot of sleepless nights. It's like they say, it's easy to be number one than to remain number one. So there's that issue. Now, since 1945 coming this way, the world was always concerned because there was one thing that countries realized. The Great Depression and the Second World War and what we call economic nationalism. Why countries colonized others and enslaved others? It's a big story. It goes back to Lincoln. This is the greatest president. Countries don't have to go to war to build economies and so on. It's you know, because it's very costly. Now the balance in terms of maintaining the leadership and Debarl, you know, order is always in short supply everywhere in the world. It's naturally there's no order beyond your country.
Yes.
And there has to be someone who takes that leadership in order to supply that order, a balancer, you know. And there's one that will always be naturally leading the pack. So that is the dilemma of the leader, and that's how you have to understand President Donald Trump. And he's trying to come up with a diplomacy where he's saying that I'm doing it best in terms of moderating this competition. But how far he's going to get with it, sometimes we have to give it some more time to see. But of course there are challenges. And I think countries don't fight all the time. And when they're not fighting, they're cooperating. And I think it's better to go the multilateral, the cooperation way. But you have to know that also countries are like, it's like the jungle out there. You know, they are out to always look to you know, to protect their own selfish interests. Listening to
Al-Sisi as well, you will tend to wonder if actually he's speaking from both sides of the mouth when you say that that they are rejecting any exploitation of the crises happening in Syria, Yemen, to create footholds for regional terrorism or enable an environment for terrorism, extremism, and sectarianism. If we maybe just project a few weeks ago, we had also the Muslim Brotherhood members who were actually exterminated, right? They were actually hanged. Were they 10 of them? Isn't that also speaking from both sides of the mouth? Because I think there was hue and cry about the human rights violation for this particular sect, so to speak. And were they not really exploiting also the same situation that he's really talking about? Any of you?
The problem is sometimes how things are done. Fundamentally, there is nothing wrong even to be a Salafist or to say that, you know, for faith purposes, even to say you have an Islamic Brotherhood and so on. The problem is the political intonations associated with the end objectives of some of these groups. The ideas of Muhammad Abdul Wahab or Hassan al-Banna, who started that Islamic Brotherhood and so on in 1928, what could have been even purely theocratic and faith-based, but people turned them around. And you saw what Morsi himself, a whole president that came with that name in that banner, that, you know, it's the time now for the Muslim Brotherhood. The same person was literally castigated and you know, just brought down by the same people who spent timeless, you know, endless nights in Tahrir. So what is important is there are world order questions that are larger in terms of how the greater powers relate, but there are nitty-gritty problems that face countries. In the Sinai Peninsula, ISIS is killing people, killing Muslims. They bomb mosques. And that's what is happening down there in Maiduguri and all these places. They kill, you know, Muslims in Mogadishu. 400 people on the 14th of October last year. I mean, these are very sad things, and therefore we can't say that he's speaking from the both sides of his mouth, but he's trying to balance out and talk to problems that are facing countries more specifically within, but also trying to speak to also global issues. I think that's what he was trying to juggle with, and it can be tricky.
Yeah. Okay, let's hear from Erastus Mwenje.
Debarl, I followed President Trump's statement yesterday keenly, and at the end of it I was actually left worried. And my fellow panelists have highlighted some of the things, but I want to develop one point that Dr. Momo has underscored, and that is a global crisis because we don't have that leadership. If you go back to the point you mentioned, the genesis of the Second World War, it was about trade. It is when America found itself with huge deficits. They were not able to export abroad, and they eventually, really, with all simmering crises that were there, you had Hitler in Germany also against what he saw as encroachment by the Jews and all that. So there were quite precipitous issues, but of course underneath was the economy, and we are in that crisis now. We are actually in a global economic crisis because America has declared trade war against China. And if you look at the whole history background for this trade war, it's because America is not competitive, and therefore it finds itself importing more from China than it's able to export. And instead of recognizing that and retool its economy, the answer is to blame China and then go into a war. Fast forward, America is the one which really nurtured globalization. In fact, if you look at all the institutions, the Bretton Woods institutions, the WTO, they were all nurtured by America. America is the one which has nurtured globalization. America is the one which has been leading the process of WTO, of new trade deal. In fact, I remember participating in one of the rounds in the US, launching the door, before the door round was in the US, which would have been the Clinton round, but because it failed, it became the Doha round. Now, looking at what is happening, the reason I'm scared is Africa is becoming the battlefield. You can see now the war between the West and the East, blaming China, blaming US. It is Africa that is going to suffer. If you look at Africa's growth in the last 15 years, it was essentially because the global economy was healthy. Because we are very weak, we are price takers. If the global economy is doing well, we also do well. The moment the global economy goes down, we go down. And so that is the scare I have, that we are entering this trade war that will take us down. But that is on the economy. Coming on the other aspect of leadership, you can see, especially the point that you raise, the key hotspots around the world, the role that the US should play is withdrawing, is now talking of American first, redefining its own concern and saying they are only going to come out and participate from American prism. That is a very dangerous policy. You can see Europe has disengaged with the US on the issue of Iran. Europe has set up a mechanism to make sure that they can continue to trade with Iran, even if US is pulling out of that agreement. Which means at the end of it all, we don't have a global leader now. With this vacuum, we are going to have chaos. And with this chaos, we are getting into uncharted territory, which will go into economic, and then you might see the trade going with all this extremism manifesting, where you are now seeing governments which rightist, nationalists, because people feel threatened. It's a very, very dangerous time.
And of course, this trade war might be also extended because also economists are warning that we should not be looking for any, amicable solution soon. So it might be projected. And the European Union has come to the fore. They're saying also they're supporting China, right, on this trade war. So this, in actual fact, is isolating US. And now if the European Union is supporting China, where now is this needle also headed to as far as the compass is concerned? Is it now also the European bloc heading towards this as well? Let's hear from Nomidamba.
Debarl, I agree with my with Ambassador on the entirety with what he has said. The Trump world is a world that is very dangerous. And Trump's point of view is one that that cannot benefit the global community the way it is. It has exposed the world in a very dangerous place. We have moved the world from the First World War, from unilateralism, to a short period of time bilateralism in the Second World War, to multilateral. And through multilateral, the whole world, Europe was at peace. The trade was booming. Africa was rising up in terms of development. China rise to the level where it is second largest economy in the world. And the movement of education, of culture, of everything was going on. And here comes this fellow who really is inward, orthodox, and with the racist tendency, remnants of the Hitler period, and turning the world upside down. So the European relationship, which is really part of the cornerstone of American foreign policy, is discarded. And its neighbors to the north, Canada, which is basically American, in North American continent, is isolated, and Mexico is isolated, and Africa is the last place in the world. Now, this is backward looking. And Rice, if you listen very carefully to Macron's speech, literally taking the leadership that America has had for many years. And all of them, you know, from King Hussein to everybody, is moving away from this fellow. And so it recognized Jerusalem as the capital city, surrender American sovereignty. Nobody is questioning American sovereignty. And said, where is this guy coming from? And how in the world did this guy got elected? And when is it going to be over? So we don't hear about it. And so the world is in a very, very dangerous place. And we're hoping that Europe and of course China and Russia coming in to take the mantle to try to keep peace around the world. Africa, my friends here just said, we're vulnerable. We're vulnerable to all the tunes and singing and dance of the world leadership. And so one need to listen very carefully to what President Kagame said, is that management of Africa global position must change. We must look at each other and look beside each other. What resources do we have?
Yes.
What sort of government, governance do we have in place? And what sort of leaders do we need? I mean, there are a lot of people who can be leaders today, but there are exceptional people who can be leaders, who can produce extraordinary outcome. There are only very few. And therefore, Africa must redress itself from the local person, person in Kenya, to all Africans looking at together. We can no longer look at United States, come and help us, Europe, come and help us. We must be able to manage our resources, manage our people, and project the continent of Africa as a member of the major global community.
Right, thank you. I just want us also to, as we're focusing on that, the United Nations happenings right now, we want also to just highlight something that also is, we've talked here before about one of our panelists, that is Dr. Peter Biar Ajak. If my director may just indulge with me on that before we move on. Freedom for Peter Biar Ajak. This is one of our panelists that has been here talking about very voraciously talking about, you know, the freedoms in South Sudan. And people have been signing petition right now. You have seen this face here before. And Peter has been in detention for 1 month without official charges against him. Actually, coming Friday, it will be 2 months right now. And this is taking a toll on his family emotionally, physically, and financially. And we are told that for a month now, Peter's 2 young boys have constantly been asking to talk to their father, but have no means of communicating with him. Also, we're told the closest they have communicated to their father was through a message written on a book cover by his 5-year-old son saying, "Baba, I miss you and I love you so much." We also informed that Peter's wife has been flying between Juba and Nairobi every week to visit Peter in detention and to come back to their 18-month and 5 years or 5-year-old boys who are staying in Kenya. As a result, the wife has stopped working so that she is able to travel between visiting her husband in detention and back to her children in Nairobi. This is a serious impact on this young family. Also, on top of that, the family members are intimidated and denied access to visit Peter if any of them appears on any media outlet or on social media. The detention is clear violation of Peter's constitutional and fundamental human rights. First, Peter is arrested and detained without specified reasons as required by the Bill of Rights, Article 12 of the Transitional Constitution of South Sudan, 2011, an International Bill of Rights. Second, Peter is detained in humane facility that qualifies for physical and psychological torture in contravention of freedom from torture. Blue House, as it is known, is a nasty security house. Third, National Security Service has deprived Peter of his right to fair trial. Since his arrest, neither Peter nor his family has been informed of the reason for arrest or any charge brought against him before any competent court until Peter has no access to a lawyer. And 1 month, it's clear now Peter's only crime is his analysis of the IGAD-led peace process of South Sudan's leaders' inability to stop the war. Those opinion and commentaries are permitted, guaranteed, and protection under the law. And we know 1 month Peter is still detained. These are actually the things that they're holding back Peter. And some of the things that there are many of them. The investigation leading to the unofficial charges are said to have focused on, one, his appearance on TV. And of course, that has been standing on guard here on AM Live. He's traveled two states in South Sudan. His call for Salva Kiir and Machar to exit. His ideas of generation exit. His Facebook and Twitter's comments. And the South Sudan Young Leadership Forum's meetings in Rwanda and Kenya. Also, investigation is still going on or ongoing, which will determine the official charges and when Peter will be taken to court. Peter was allowed to meet his lawyers after 5 weeks in detention. So there you go. You have you can actually head over to this particular page, which is www.change.org. What they're seeking is to actually get 100 people who have signed for this petition so that they can present it now to the United Nations, especially when this forum is ongoing in New York right now. So they want to present this particular petition to the United Nations, and they're seeking for you, of course, indulgence of this as far as signing the petition is concerned. Peter, we know him. He's a man of good intent, and he's just looking forward for a country that is peaceful down there in South Sudan. I don't know what we'll comment from a comment here from Dr. Mustafa.
Yeah, Debarl, this is to appeal to the government of South Sudan to reconsider their decision to detain Peter Biar Ajak, release him. I do not think he is a threat to anybody, anyone, let alone state security in South Sudan. And if indeed there are issues, that there are charges they need to bring and charge Peter Biar Ajak, let them do that, but let them release him to be with his family. He is not going to cause any trouble. And if his sin is the analysis that is done, that we've been discussing here, these are issues that we speak about openly, with good intention to try and help political leaders and decision makers and decision takers to sharpen their understanding and thinking about very difficult issues. I still call on the government of South Sudan to release Peter Biar Ajak.
All right. Dr. Momonzao.
Yeah, you know, sometimes you find that states are the place of last resort for the protection of the life and liberty, property of citizens. And being a South Sudanese national, we have to respect the government of South Sudan and its people. What is important is, I know governments have information, they exchange information. There could be other things going on, but I trust that governments should be able to intercede. Now that even petitions and so on, people are signing to be at the UN General Assembly, the Secretary General should be able to take a look at that matter so that he can encourage governments to intercede, our own government and so on. So there could be other information that is not in the public domain that only governments discuss, and we want to respect that space and not to challenge it in any adversity, but in a way that we can, this matter can be interceded so that Peter Biar Ajak is able to, you know, go on with his ordinary, his normal life, you know, as a citizen.
Thank you.
And as a friend of Kenya.
Yep. Yeah. Ambassador Erastus Mojo.
Well, first of all, our hearts really go to the family of Peter. And when you have a young child that does not understand what has happened, looking for his father, I mean, as a grandfather, I feel the pain. And I want really to express my sympathies with the family. The second point, those of us who have interacted and have known Peter, Peter yearns for a democratic, developed, peaceful Sudan. And the only crime perhaps then he has is that he has talked about generational change. And I want to really tell our leaders that the best ally of any leader are the people who can always tell you your shortcomings. Unfortunately, many leaders like to be surrounded by people who tell them how good they are, and they don't want to listen to any criticism. And to me, if I love you, I'll tell you where you're going wrong. And I think when I listen to Peter, Peter has always been talking about what he sees that is not working in Sudan. And what they would have done is bring these guys in and incorporate them, be part of the peace deal. And that is one thing. And taking a different stance from what Dr. Muma said, I don't believe in this day and age that there are things we should keep under our dockets or under our tables. There are courts there. Bring him, charge him. Let there be international presence to see that what is being charged of is a crime he has committed. If there is evidence, then let the law take its course. But detention without trial is a cake in this modern state. And so to me, I would urge that really Sudan needs to rise above its conflict it has had. It has bigger problems than keeping young people like Peter in detention, the refugees, implementing the peace deal, unity, and all that. If you accumulate this, I would in fact appeal to international community to insist and say that really if we are not going to do anything right, we shouldn't be able to even support the government. Yeah.
All right. Noami Damba.
Taban Deng, my friend, you know me well, and I know you. You are the Vice President of Sudan. Peter Biar Ajak is not the enemy of the Sudanese people. He's an asset. He has a young family. He means well to the country. He's passionate about the country of Sudan. Be reasonable. Reasonable voice that release people and the like of Peter to be part and parcel of the government of Sudan, South Sudan, so that you can project an image of the country that will unite together for the goodness of the people. That's my message directly to you.
All right, so there you have it. Peter Biar Ajak is one of us here. Every Wednesday looking at matter security. And of course, we've been talking extensively of what is happening in South Sudan right now. And he's been a very, critical voice when it comes to what is happening in South Sudan. Once again, Freedom for Peter Biar Ajak is the page that you need to go to at www.change.org. There you have it. They're looking for 100,000 petitions right now. This is what it stands at, almost 78. So it will be, let's go to 150,000 if you can, right? And so far, just to remind you as well, efforts that they've been put forth so far is the hashtag Free Peter Biar campaign is currently running. Also, Peter's former classmates from Harvard University are organizing a rally at Dag Hammarskjöld Plaza East, that is 47th Street there, and First Avenue opposite the UN headquarters in New York on Friday, the 28th at 5:30 p.m. And as I've mentioned, 78 people have signed the petition globally on change.org for the freedom of Peter Biar Ajak. So they're standing in solidarity. If you've been watching Standing on Guard, you know Peter Biar Ajak. And of course, right now is a moment that he needs us as far as signing this petition is concerned, so that they can present it at the United Nations General Assembly to the Secretary General of the United Nations, I should say. Right, let's just get our closing remarks so far. And one of the issues that you've not really highlighted as well, briefly as we're closing, is the KDF, of course, who put down some, terrorist sleeper cells as well. That is at the coast. We can just hear from you briefly.
Yeah,
Dr. Mustafa,
yeah,
as also you're giving a closing remarks.
With the news that KDF killed about 10 Al-Shabaab operatives in Lamu is a clear indication of what we've all suspected all along, that Al-Shabaab is still active in pockets of Kenya, and that it's very important that the security situation in Lamu, in particular the Boni forest is restored, that the local people work closely with the security agencies to try and root out Al-Shabaab and bring back peace. And also an appeal to the government, the Republic of Kenya, to focus a lot more on countering violent extremism and working with local communities to try and address and redress issues that are making those communities feel marginalized and excluded.
All right, thank you. Dr. Momonzao?
Yeah, without getting into operational or tactical nuances of these issues, what is important is to say that such kind of combat settings should not mostly be the exception, but the norm should be more preventive. And therefore, where gains have been made, they should be backed with more of a building community resilience. And in the same way, someone who goes to touch their neighbor's house because they don't like them, they want to scatter their cows and such things, they are just extremists. And therefore, extremism in our society, including people who just wake up and just kill others and do bad things, that is all extremism. And if it has any political ideology behind it, it becomes very bad. It becomes terrorism. And therefore, we want to appeal to our people to be more tolerant as we go forward.
Ambassador Erastus Muncha.
I couldn't agree with my neighbor here much more. Last week, I was fortunate to be in Addis for a while, and I was a little taken aback to have seen this process that was taking off very well hit some headwind. But I'm happy to see that the Prime Minister is leading once again from the front. This is the kind of thing we are talking about, because peaceful coexistence is becoming a precious tool for humanity. And even in Kenya, this extremism is not only here, it is global, and we need now to devise mechanism on how to really push back this growing anti-society.
Right. Finally,
my fellow Kenyan,
Professor Naomi Damba.
Let us join President Kenyatta, Haji, and Koinoti to fight corruption. We cannot afford to move our eye away from corruption. Corruption reduces foreign direct investment. Corruption encourages violence in the sense of instability in the country. Corruption provides ground for political instability. Corruption denied us all ways and means to address our development. We must never keep our eye away from corruption.
Correct.
Right. Thank you. Thank you, panelists, this morning. We really do appreciate this discussion. As we're winding up, I'm just reading one or two tweets, I should say. Today, we had technical challenges with our Twitter handle or our internet, so not many of them. But we have Jacob saying that free Peter Biar, hashtag free Peter Biar, Ajak's new intellectual think tank for South Sudan. Let Juba not act on Africa kill her son narrative to confine our friend Peter. Then we have also Samuel Lear saying that Africa has all it needs to sustain economic development, Kenya inclusive, but we lack one amongst all effective human resources, which is an integral part necessary to make things work, be it in labor, management or leadership, lack anything but not human resource. That is what he's saying. Also, we have Jack Dienge saying transparency and accountability are the defining cornerstones of democracy, given our current political scenario, protecting our democratic values in the way to secure the future and safeguard the blessings of our independence. And finally, also we have Dinga Odera Jacob saying that is the Africa we have today. The leaders we have today are so boorish, primitive and outlandish. Instead of protecting their electorates and people in general, they chest thump on how elections will proceed despite the unrest and violence in our countries. Thank you very much for your valued company. And of course, right now we are turning our focus as well on Living With Us, which is up next. Don't go away.